Welcome to the program. I'm Okpeyemi Owoshini. We begin with business news. The Nigerian government has announced a $50 million investment in the Nigerian Wholesale Impact Investment Fund. In a post on X, the Ministry of Finance said the investment is to show the government's commitment to fostering sustainable economic growth. The ministry said the initiative is projected to unlock significant financing for micro, small and medium enterprises and also generates millions of jobs across priority sectors. According to the statement, the strategic initiative supports President Bola Tinubu's vision of achieving 7% annual economic growth with a focus on critical sectors including agriculture, infrastructure and digital innovation. We'll go on a break now and be back with company news. Welcome back. Now, a new crude for loan deal between the Nigerian government and Saudi Arabian oil company Aramco worth $5 billion has stalled and is struggling to reach an agreement following the recent decline in crude prices. The deal hit a brick wall after fresh market indices and a recent decline in crude prices sparked concern among banks that were expected to back the deal. The facility would be Nigeria's largest oil-backed loan to date and Saudi Arabia's first participation of this scale in the country, although the decline in oil price could shrink the size of the deal. We'll take a short break now, but when Money Matters return, we're discussing the rise of local oil firms in Nigeria's oil and gas industry. I'll bring you more details on this after this break. Welcome back. Now, Nigeria's oil and gas landscape is currently undergoing a significant transformation, with local companies increasingly expanding their roles and driving a new phase of potential sectoral growth. We are seeing indigenous firms step up, acquiring more assets from international oil majors and committing to substantial investment. Local players now account for over 50% of Nigeria's oil production, a notable increase from around 40% before the major divestment. Now, this growing role is seen as pivotal to the government's ambitious target of achieving 2.1 million barrels of oil per day by 2025. Companies like Renaissance Africa Energy are reportedly planning $15 billion in investment over 5 years, while Seplat Energy is aiming to invest up to $320 million in 2025 to boost its crude output to around 140,000 barrels per day. We've also seen milestones like Green Energy Limited, Nigeria's first locally developed and operated onshore crude terminal. Now, so what does this mean for Nigeria's ability to meet its oil production target, and what are the opportunities and challenges ahead for these local giants? Now, to help us unpack the implications of this crucial shift, we are joined today by the Group Managing Director of Capital Bancorp PLC, Mr. Gbolahan Olojede. Thank you for joining me on the program, Mr. Olojede.
Yeah,
now, historically, the Nigerian oil and gas industry was dominated by international oil companies, but we now see that indigenous firms reportedly account for over 50% of Nigeria's total oil production. Now, that's a significant rise from approximately 40% before the major divestment. Now, I would like to know what you think are the primary drivers behind this surge and increased predominance of local oil and gas companies, leading to such a substantial shift in market share.
Okay, the oil majors, some of them have been here for 50, 60 years, and they have assets, both offshore and onshore. But what has been observed over the years is what appears to be persistent problems with the communities. Number one. Number two, issues of oil theft became, very predominantly, especially around 2021, 2022, but it had actually started way before then. So there's also been issues around vandalization, of oil asset and the rest of it. So So the oil just were becoming increasingly unhappy with their onshore operations because of these many issues. So the decisions were being made. For most of them, it is from their home country that, look, you need to leave those onshore assets and concentrate only on the offshore. So we saw a lot of them selling off their onshore assets to local players while they move offshore, which is a bit safer for them. There are no communities in the ocean, so they can do their business without having to deal with community-related issues and a few other factors out there. It is believed that the local players, being Nigerians themselves, are in a better position to have robust engagement with the communities and therefore have a more pleasing operating environment for the onshore assets. So they are better positioned to handle those onshore assets than the multinationals, foreign multinationals who have been around here for a while.
All right, so now, can you highlight some of the most significant achievements or contributions of these local firms? For instance, we've seen projects like Green Energies Limited or Takikpo Crude Terminal with a capacity of 360,000 barrels per day, and new blends like Konoi's Obodo Crude. Now, what specific areas of the value chain, beyond just production, will you say they have made the most impact?
I think production is one major area. They have become a more significant contributor to production, especially when it comes to the onshore assets. Of course, some of them have also gone into the refining business. You have the Walter Smith of this world. You have the Aradel. Aradel is in refining as well, and a few other players are there. There are even new ones that have collected, refining license, including businesses like the proposed Boa refining. So more players are playing not just in the production, in crude production, but also down the chain, which include refining. To even go further, you have a situation in which a firm like Dangote, which started to become a domineering business in the refining space, saying that it is positioning to disrupt the entire downstream. So when you start to hear comments like that, it means that possibly even up to the retail stations, the retail end of the market, we're going to see disruptors that are essentially local companies, including people like Dangote, that is looking at that part of the business.
Now, Nigeria has a very ambitious target, if you ask me, to increase its oil production by an additional 1 million barrels per day to 2.6 million barrels per day by 2026. Now, given the current contribution of over half of national production, how crucial do you think indigenous firms are in achieving this specific projection? And also, what unique advantages do they possess that make them so vital for boosting production to meet this particular target?
You see, Nigeria actually in the past, I believe 2005 November or thereabout, we actually produced approximately 2.5 million barrels per day of crude in this country. So this target that is looking so new should, under normal circumstances, should not have been so new. But for the fact that over the decades, we have lost a lot of our production capacity to many reasons. Number one is weak infrastructure. So some of the pipelines, for example, have been there for 40, 50 years, and they are getting old, and they are susceptible to, breaking down periodically. Sometimes when some of these pipelines break down, they could be in that state for 4, 5, 6 months before they are finally restored back to active work. So so a country that 20 years ago had produced about 2.5 million barrels per day should not be scared of the possibility that it can do 2.6 million barrels per day 20 years after. All the problems that have led to the loss of production, they have been attended to. We have spoken about oil theft. Oil theft situation has improved from what it was in 2021, 2022, up until now. We have seen that. The legal and institutional framework for the industry, as captured in the Petroleum Industry Act, ended up being passed into law after about 13 years in the works. Now, that was another factor that had led to a situation in which there was not enough investment in the oil and gas space. When you're not sure of the legal and institutional framework for the business you're going to put money in. But thank God we've moved past that. We have PIA, we've started dealing seriously. We've made major improvement in the area of oil theft. Now that the institutional framework and legal is cleared, it clears the way also for more investment to come into that place, because you now have certainties of the operating environment in certain important part of the operating environment. So more investment will come into that space. So as more investment continue to come in, we will begin to see us move towards that new target. I deliberately started from the point of the fact that we've been around that number before, and that it is possible to do it again if we can fix all those issues that reduce our production to what it became. I think the worst part was in 2022, when we produced less than 1 million barrels per day, about 931,000 barrels per day at some point. Now, if we're able to rev up production significantly, it has implications for government revenue, because crude oil revenue remains an integral part of government revenue. That is number one. Number two is the foreign exchange and its implication of crude oil. While crude oil contribution to the total revenue pot might have shrunk over the years, the contribution to the foreign exchange earning is still very significant, possibly up to 70, 75% or even more of our foreign exchange earning is still dancing around oil. Therefore, if we're able to produce more, we'll be able to earn more. If we earn more, we're able to stabilize the value of our currency. That's on the production side. If we're able to produce more, we probably will be able to give feedstock to refineries. The Dangote refinery is there, Aradel is there, Walter Smith is there, other ones are coming up. We'll be able to produce feedstock such that our refining capacity will improve dramatically. Now, that has an implication. That is value addition, as opposed to exporting commodity. Crude oil is just a commodity. When you start to refine, you are doing value addition. You will create jobs. The value of your output will increase. You make more money. And we will produce more than we can consume in this country and have a window to export the excess and make foreign exchange and make money from that. So it's a blessing that we must pursue, and it is possible.
All right, so I know you mentioned the foreign exchange now, but then away from the foreign exchange, what other policy or regulatory changes do you believe are most crucial right now to further empower local firms and accelerate their contribution towards the national goal of an additional 1 million barrels per day by 2026? Do you think there are particular incentives or reforms that could unlock more of this production?
Well, the industry is not a nascent one. Is a mature one. Most of the players that we see in that space today have been there for a while. However, there are issues around. There have been in the past a lot of issues around approval, getting the authorities, the necessary authority, be it the NNPC or the president, the federal government of Nigeria, to grant certain required approvals. There have been issues about delays. So if we can ensure that kind of bottlenecks are removed from that space, it would definitely help a great deal. I remember a couple of the companies who had to wait for such a long period before their acquisition could be approved by the federal government. I mean, agreed. There has to be the right due diligence to ensure that things are properly done. But once that is cleared, we should be ready to give people the necessary approval so that they can begin to run the business as it were. Then issues around community. Of course, we have spoken about the fact that the local companies are better positioned to manage communities. The law, the Petroleum Industry Act, also specified certain matters that should help to manage those communities in terms of investment and the participation of those communities in the prosperity of the host, of the companies that are operating in their environment. So we also need to ensure that, the law, the regulator has a role in that anyway, to ensure that the laws as prescribed are being followed and proper engagement are being held at the right levels with those communities, so that issues like the things that led to the shutdown of oil wells in the Ogoniland, for example, could be avoided, and probably in any other part of Niger Delta where there have been, shutting of oil wells because of community-related issues, because of issues of pollution and the rest of it, that those matters could be resolved and those oil wells could be put back into action. If we are able to do this, it will support tremendously the achievement of the target that we spoke about.
Now, let's look at the broader economic and social benefits that the rise of local oil firm brings to Nigeria, that away from raw production numbers. How do their operations contribute to local content development, that job creation and revenue retention when compared to international oil companies in the country?
Of course, for international oil companies, a chunk of their shareholders are out there, their own outside of this country. Of course, what you might have is there's the local version, it's incorporated in Nigeria, and Nigerian shareholders are there as well. But be as it may, the foreign participant, after it has made profit, will take a chunk of the profit back to his own home country to go and distribute to the shareholders who are foreigners. Now, when the investor is Nigerian, the likelihood is that there are more Nigerian shareholders that are there, and they are here, and the benefit to be here. So when they make profits and they declare dividends, a lot of the dividends stay here in Nigeria with Nigerians. What that does is that it creates additional wealth for all the individual shareholders. There is more disposable income at their disposal. They can choose to invest, they can choose to consume, and whatever they do, whether it is investment or it is consumption, it is of economic benefit in general. If you spend, you create multiplier effect and all of that stuff. Beyond that is when they are here, employment. You see, we have the Nigerian content law, which has encouraged the reality that, look, if there are jobs that Nigerians can do, then it must be given to Nigerians. And all the services that Nigerians can provide, it should be given to Nigerians. So the implementation or expansion of the implementation of those laws are better under the prevailing circumstance. Of course, there are also people who have expressed certain fears about indigenous companies, saying things like, are we sure that the environment of operations when it comes to matters of pollution will improve by virtue of local players, or things will get worse? I don't believe that being a local player is what will make you pollute your environment. After all, it is also your environment. This is your country. But beyond that is the fact that it is the role of the regulator to step up its activities and ensure that, irrespective of the ownership of a company, whether it is foreign or local, you cannot pollute the environment. And if you do so, you must be made to clean the environment back as it were. So there is place for investment and local impact. When you look at the provision by the Petroleum Industry Act for oil companies to impact their communities, it's something delightful. And I hope that as they prosper and they make money available under those community investments, we will begin to see a turnaround in those communities as well, and the economics of those communities. So it's a multifaceted benefit that will be brought to the table by virtue of what is going on in that space.
All right, because you mentioned it, I was going to ask you that let's talk about environmental pollution, because it's one of the main issues that host communities have to battle with. Now, how well do you think the Nigerian government can further tackle this and basically to find a balance between the investors and the host communities?
Well, a lot of the pollution that we see are products of vandalization. There are natural accidents, no doubt about that. There are instances in which there are negligence on the part of the operators themselves. So those are also incidents that lead to pollution. But a significant part it has been traced to vandalization. Now, who are the people that vandalize these pipelines? They are not strangers. It's unlikely that somebody is going to come from neighboring country or from far away to come and start, blowing up pipes or cutting pipes or fixing some other pipes on the existing pipes so that you can steal crude or any other product. It is mostly the community people that are also involved. Now, the realization of that fact is part of what drove the issues around using people from communities to guide or to guard and protect pipelines in the Niger Delta. The Tantita is a very popular one. There are others. Because they are from those communities, it is believed that they are in a better position. And I mean, we have said already that it's not strangers that come to communities to come and break pipes. So if you involve those communities in the protection, then we are more likely to see a dramatic reduction in vandalization and, by extension, the pollution that are induced by vandalization. The other kind of pollution that may be from negligence of operators and the rest of it, that is in the duty of the regulators. And the regulators can step in there and ensure that as much as possible, we can prevent or reduce these issues. I don't think we have done enough in the past, because anytime I see images of pollution in the Niger Delta, it makes me feel very sad. That is this where so much wealth comes from? And this is the way the people live. Oil has been taken from the land, but the people have remained extremely poor. The environment, extremely poor. The waters, the vegetation, everything poor. So there is absolutely no doubt that the regulator has a big role to ensure that we can reduce all those matters of pollution, while at the same time, the improved community and operator relationship and the use of community people in the protection of oil infrastructure will help a great deal to moderate the level of pollution that we have seen in that sector.
Briefly, just before I let you go, sir, Mr. Olojede, now considering the target of an additional 1 million barrels per day by 2026 and the pivotal role of local firms, now what do you think is the most single important thing policymakers and stakeholders can do to maximize their potential and to also ensure that they meet the expected contribution in to Nigeria's energy future?
Well, there are financing issues. I was reviewing the report of one of the oil companies recently, and I saw that they borrowed about, was it about 2 trillion naira or something like that? It must have been in dollars anyway. about 2 trillion naira. So it's a capital intensive business, and at the same time, we have situations in which certain markets where it was easier to get financing some years ago, the financing from those markets are starting to shrink gradually because of the campaign against fossil fuel. So we already have a situation in which certain banks, out there have already made policy that caps how much they can invest, they can put out there in oil and gas, in fossil fuel related transactions. For some banks, it is a total no-no. We are no more doing fossil fuel related transactions. So it is left for Nigeria and for Africa to drive a more robust financing environment for our oil and gas assets. So the African financing platforms, as well as the local financing platform, will have to enhance capacity to provide financing for this industry. If we do that, and if we create incentives and policy that aligns with that, policy that align with that thinking, we will be providing good support for that target to be achievable.
Well, the Group Managing Director of Capital Bancorp PLC, Mr. Gbolahan Olojede, many thanks for lending your thoughts on the program.
Thanks for having me.
You're welcome, sir. And that's it on this episode of the program. Many thanks for joining us. I'm Okpeyemi Owosheni. See you next time.